What is up, everybody? Week number 9 of NLL Weekly here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get us. You can catch us each and every Wednesday. We will tape about 7 o'clock here on our YouTube channel, NLL Weekly. My name is Chris Spidbauer. Thank you so much for joining us. Always appreciate you guys spending some time with us here each and every Wednesday, or if you're catching us. And again, you can find this if you didn't catch the live version, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict. So all of that can be at your disposal to catch our podcast each and every week. As I said, week number 9, a lot has gone on. Obviously, the previous 8 weeks, and we've got 2 weeks left until the end of the regular season. We're going to get down to brass tacks. We're going to talk with Findlay head coach Stefan Adams here in a few moments, get his thoughts on the 2024 season with his Findlay Trojans, what they've experienced. Obviously, a big topic of conversation is going to be what has happened with Ryan Montgomery and the quarterback situation there at Findlay. Lots to talk about with him. Then about 7:30-ish type time, we're going to bring our Whitmer color analyst and also just all-around football connoisseur here in Northwest Ohio, Justin Keller. He's going to come on, talk about the playoff chase. We're going to go through all the teams in the Northern Lakes League, talk about their regions, where they sit currently in the computer point standings, and maybe some of the things that could play out over the next couple of weeks. So a lot to talk about there as well. So much going on in and around the Northern Lakes League. The big news last week, of course, was how was Perrysburg going to respond after the loss against Whitmer? Were they going to be able to go on the road down to Hancock County? Were they going to be able to take care of business against the Findlay Trojans? They did that. They forced a couple of interceptions in the first half that allowed them to jump out to a pretty sizable lead. I believe it was 29-7 at halftime. And then from there on out, Perrysburg able to kind of cruise in that game. So really not a huge surprise that the Yellow Jackets won, but maybe the spread of the final score, definitely a little surprising there. The other one, of course, being Clay clinching a share of that Cardinal division, their first share of any division title since, I believe, like 1982 or something like that. So congratulations to John Gallius and the Clay Eagles. Lots to talk about with that team and where do they go here. They have a chance to win it outright this weekend. This will be their last Cardinal division game this Friday night when they take on Southview. After that, they will close in week 10 with Rogers. So this is it. If Clay wins on Friday night over Southview, that will do it for the Cardinal division, and Clay will be outright champion, much like we saw the Cougars do a year ago. On the Buckeye side, we're still in that situation where Anthony Wayne wins out. They are the undisputed Buckeye champion. However, Perrysburg can change that come week 10. Both of those two teams have tune-up games, no disrespect to Northview and Springfield, but Anthony Wayne is going to have the Northview Wildcats at their place on Friday night, and then Perrysburg is going to host Springfield on Friday. So both of those two teams, before we get that week 10 showdown against each other over at Anthony Wayne to decide that Buckeye division. So lots to get to tonight. But before we do, want to say thank you to one of our sponsors, and that, of course, is our friends over at Car Stereo One. Car Stereo One is your place for any of your needs. They provide high-quality audio system speakers, accessories for your vehicle with a wide range of products and expert advice. They can help you upgrade your car's sound system and enhance the driving experience. As I said, remote starters, car stereos, there we go, window tint, speakers and subwoofers, bikes and boats they work on, custom interiors, vehicle wraps, wheels, anything you want to do to customize your vehicle, Car Stereo One is going to have you covered. So make sure you give our friends Parker Lopez and his team a call, 419-474-5553. You can also visit them 3120 Central Avenue there in Toledo. And then, of course, check them out online at carstereo1.com. And I am so happy to be joined by the head football coach of the Findlay Trojans, as he's doing dad duty tonight like he did last year with us as well. He had his little girl with us last year, and now we're excited because they are back here for another year. We got the Dax that looked like off to the side. So there he is. Hi, Dax. So this is Coach Stefan Adams. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. Looks like you got us on mute there.
There we go. I was trying to stop
There we
him
go.
from
No,
going
no
off.
worries. No worries. No worries. I know you're pulling dad duty, so I always appreciate you spending some
It's
time
all
with.
good, man.
So obviously, not the way you expected to start the season this year, and I'm sure you're tired of talking about Ryan's injury because it happened 7 weeks ago, but clearly not what you guys expected to happen. A huge part of your team goes down in week 1. Just kind of talk about what that's been like for this group, because you've kind of had to pivot on the fly. I know you're a big believer and everything happens for a reason, but certainly that was not something that you guys anticipated on happening in week 1.
Yeah, definitely a unique situation. It wasn't as if it was like the first game and it was into the third quarter. It was literally the first drive against, a very good Central Catholic team that we felt pretty good about what we could do offensively moving into that game. We thought we had some advantages there, and then all of a sudden, you're faced with putting in, a guy who's been prepared, but obviously it's hard to simulate those kind of games. And nonetheless, in that moment, I was really proud of how resilient our kids were, of how specifically Riley Corcos is and was. He jumped in there and was still able to produce. Which I think is exciting to be able to see that at least, somewhere in our program that kids are getting taught, and getting coached up, right, and prepared for that moment. So, definitely some adversity, but you're right. I mean, things happen for reasons that sometimes we don't know. I guess that's what leaning on faith is, right?
Yeah.
And, what you try to do in those moments are just lean back to what you've been doing, your teaching and your coaching. And I think we've had some high moments and we've had some low moments, of course. But that's part of the journey when you lose such a big a figure. I mean, to be honest with you, like Ryan.
A lot of times I feel like people wonder what's next. Obviously, you don't want to see Ryan go down the way he went down, but I bet a lot of people came up to you and said, well, what are you guys going to do next year? What are you guys going to do next year? And next year arrived a lot faster than you guys thought it was going to.
Yep.
But you're right. Both of those guys, both Riley and Landon Eckelberry, have acquitted themselves really well. What does each bring to the table, and why do you kind of play the way that you've rotated them through?
Yeah, well, we went into the Lima game, which was game 2. We went in as Riley being the next up guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that's been behind Ryan. He's been the one he's extremely intelligent, very smart kid. Does a great job of understanding the offense and what we're trying to do. Execution's a different ball game, but he definitely knows what we're talking about when we talk to him, when we're talking football and what we want to get accomplished on offense. Landon was kind of a deal where we had, you're faced with so many decisions in that moment. You sit down as a staff and you're like, okay, well, here we are in a situation that maybe we didn't think we were going to be in. Okay, so then what, right? So then, Okay, what if Riley goes down? Then what are we going to do? Is that going to be bringing up a guy who's a developmental guy on the JV program, or is that bringing up a freshman? These are things you don't want to do. And then we're like, okay, the year before, Landon did play, he did play quarterback in 8th grade a little bit and has the experience there. And we felt kind of watching him in that Central game, he was doing some really physical things against some top players and was fearless about it. And so we're like, okay, we think his kid's equipped, so we might as well just get them ready. They both have different skill sets. Landon's probably more, he's got a big arm, a lively arm, maybe not as polished, but getting better at it.
Sure.
But also has an ability to run the ball as well, too. So I think that threat, we felt physically that both guys were ready. And then really watching Landon in the second half of Lima really gave us a different dynamic. So ultimately we decided that was kind of best fit for where we were going with our offense. And he's kind of done a great job up to this point in time. I think Anthony Wayne, I'm sure you got a chance to kind of peek and hear about the Anthony Wayne game. I mean, I still kind of stunned, kind of irritated, and I'll explain why irritated in a second. Because, we asked a freshman quarterback who is a 6'2", almost, 195-pounder quarterback to run the ball 29 stinking times.
Yeah.
And then was pretty dang efficient in the pass game, throwing for 24 for 30, for 315 and 2 touchdowns. I mean, these are things that we asked that I'm like, man, we would not want to put a kid in that position, but I think it kind of shows you what kind of kid mentally that he is, and very proud of his efforts there. And quick little injury on that last Friday, just a little tear of the skin on the arm, but nonetheless, He's been back at practice this week and looking to play on Friday.
You mentioned kind of asking freshmen to do some things that obviously you're not expecting them to have to do. And I look at his play so far, and when you see like the game against Clay, for example, and the stat line from that game, not what you wanted, obviously, as a outcome. But when you take this team and you have a kid that sets the single game passing record in his fourth game as a starter, just really speaks to how good and how high the ceiling really is. And you guys are just scratching the surface with Landon.
No doubt. I think it's he brings some different skill sets to the table, and you said it, and you hit right on the mark. There's just a different skill set. I think there's something to, and we look back at like Ryan's journey when he was a freshman as well. Like some of those games where like they don't know any better. You
Sure.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they have a level of knowledge and a depth of knowledge, but they really don't know any better. And they're out there just playing. And trying to, what I give credit to the offensive staff for is they got this kid to be able to literally take what the defense is giving them, which is all you say all the time to a quarterback, right? Take what they give you. Take what they give you. Well, he did, and what he did was pretty phenomenal to try to give us a chance to get back in that game. And like you said, set those records that we set that night was pretty incredible. And yes, we are just scratching the surface and excited about where we can continue to go now and in the future.
I look at the receivers too, and that was an area that a lot of people wondered, what were you going to do there? Because you lose someone like Ben Ireland, and that's really hard. Javonte Hill's another one that you got to replace. And those two guys were clearly some of the better receivers that have probably ever worn a Findlay uniform. But Reese Little, I remember covering your guys' game against Fremont Ross when you guys had the walk-off kickoff return for a touchdown, and Reese had some big catches in that game. Jacob Ragland's been good. People, I guess, underestimate this receiving core at your own risk because there's still a lot of talent there.
No doubt. And I think a lot of what we do is predicated on just getting our playmakers the ball. I think, you talk about last year's group, across the board, you're talking about Javonte Hill, who had over 1,000 yards receiving. And then you look at everybody else had somewhere between like 300 and 500. And, the ball was spread out. Obviously Javonte was our alpha, but a lot of guys did a lot of things. And I think it just speaks to kind of the athletes that we have. And that's kind of why we tailor what we do to what we have. And you had a kid like Ragland who really had a solid year, but really took off in the second half of the season and dominated our second half of the season as well. You're seeing him right now do that and be our next guy. Then you have Reese Little in there in the fold. We have a sophomore, Carter Emke, who's done a great job. Who we didn't foresee this, but like he's just answered the call and has gotten better and better and better. Along with guys like Bryson Smith, who plays kind of that tight end role for us. He's out there. Brian Guthrie. I think we have guys that are very capable that do what you ask them to do. We asked kind of our DB, Israel Moore, to come over and play both sides of the ball. And he did some spectacular. I mean, his best game was that Anthony Wayne game as far as playing both sides of the ball and being extremely effective. So, we still got some talented kids, and there's no doubt about that. And I think our system allows our athletes to be able to go out there and make plays.
Guy that always gets overlooked because he plays a position that, unfortunately, the only time you really talk about him is when he makes a mistake.
Yep.
Baylor Wilkins going to Indiana, big kid, has been a stalwart for you guys on the offensive line. There's also a lot of experience back on that offensive line going through the two deep last night and kind of starting to put some of my notes together for Friday. Notice the fact that there's 3 seniors on that line that played a year ago. Pretty impressive to have, Baylor, but then also have some of these other guys that have played before. There's a lot of experience up front, and that helps so much in so many different areas.
Yeah, it's funny. Last year coming into the season, we felt pretty good man for man of what we had in our program last season. All spots but our offensive line. We have we go into that year last year in that season with only one returning senior that has game experience. And then that senior, Des Bailey, who shout out to Des. Des is down at Cincinnati doing his architecture, his major, which is great.
That's a tough program to get into. My brother did that, so congrats to him.
Des is awesome. And we when we lost Des, I mean, you're like, okay, we have nobody that has played meaningful minutes on a varsity stage. And then big credit to our offensive line coach, Matt Iliff, did a great job of teaching those guys. He's a guy who's played at Findlay and coached under Corey Allen, coached by Corey Allen, and just has all the knowledge that Corey gave him. And he coaches our kids up pretty well. So that group, although the question mark was on them, they became kind of a very important group for us and stepped up to the plate. So then you come into this year, right? A lot of unknowns elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then, man, we got this group that has played so many meaningful minutes on the offensive line. We knew that we were going to have some moments and opportunities to lean on them this year. And I think lean on them means sometimes people get that confused. It wasn't just necessarily in the run game, but it's also like, yeah, we're going to need these guys to hold up and protect our quarterback. Yeah. And that trust factor. And I think if you watch any of our film, what you'll see is, you see obviously, scrimmage film from Ryan, like he was extremely comfortable in the pocket, like no issues at all. And sorry if you hear the cymbals in the background.
No worries. No worries.
But yeah, you see Ryan was extremely confident in the pocket. And then I think, Landon coming in and Riley coming in, those guys know what those guys can do up front. And the confidence you see Landon just sitting in the pocket among sometimes chaos and just still operating and delivering. It's a group that we were excited about coming back this year because we knew that experience was there. And
those guys probably can give Landon or Riley, when they're in those tense moments, because they were there in those tense moments a year ago. We rewind to week 9, and I know it ended up being a pretty lopsided game, but going up to Whitmer, winning on the road in week 9 to claim a share of that division title and all that good stuff. Those guys can basically, I guess, impart a lot of that wisdom or a lot of that calmness to Riley or Landon in those situations to say, all right, relax, we're good. Because a lot of times, those young guys just start to panic.
Well, I think that's exactly it. You just got to lean on me, right? Like when times get hectic, when times get hard, you got to know who you're leaning on. And I think those guys have a pretty good group to lean on. I think you go across the board. You talked about already Baylor Wilkin, who's our most physically dominating, when you see him, and also how he plays the game as well too. Giovanni Ambrister, who's on the left side, left guard, is not too far from Baylor. Just a little height difference there. Sure. Zach Searles, our center, is a battler. Just a tough kid who stands in there, and man, he's just a warrior. And then you have right guard Brody Smith's kind of our steady Eddie. He just kind of does his thing, and then you finish off with Ben Mueller, who's all 6 foot, 190 something, and just battles his butt off. We have the most probably unconventional line sometimes, it looks like. And I know everybody goes through their things, but it's definitely an unconventional group in some aspects when you go from left to right, but all together, it's a group that really has done a good job of protecting our quarterbacks and creating lanes for us in the run game.
Running back wise, probably not the area that gets the most love, just because you tend to have been with Ryan anyway, a pass first kind of offense. And I know that you were a former running back, and I did a little research. Bloomsburg Husky, is that right?
Yes, you did do your research.
I went right back into the archives.
You didn't find any bad pictures, did you?
No, not at all. But talk about that position, because that's obviously a spot that's close to your heart. What do they bring to the table?
We just got some guys who are still developing, if I'm just being very candid about it. We got some guys who are pretty – they work hard, we've had some high moments. We've had some low moments. I think they're just guys who are still figuring out the run game, and it is a position that I still coach. It's a position that I'm still very active with, and I probably have sometimes too high expectations, but I've seen what it's like. I've been around. I've been in a program at Bloomsburg, like you said, great research there. But I was at a program that, a couple of years, one year we averaged 315 rushing per game.
Wow.
So we had such great pride in running the ball, and it was straight I formation. It was straight wide zone, ISO, sprint draw. Some old school run game stuff, but you got to be able to be physical and break tackles. Yeah. Not everything's going to be picture perfect. Not everything's going to be block perfect. And I think that's where we're still developing a little bit, with those guys. They go hard. They listen. They know how to get to the right spots. We just need some guys to be able to finish. So I think we're still developing there. Still got some work to do, but I think that's the beauty in coaching, right? There's going to be a moment where I'm going to get really excited and be pumped because they're going to take that next step and that next level. They've been steady Eddie. We've had a 100-yard rusher. Griffin Lane has had a 100-yard gain. We have a sophomore in Ramir Williams who's growing every single week. And then we've mixed in a kid, Dante Kaufman, and also got a young buck, a young freshman who I think is going to be pretty good, and Aiden Lomley. So, we have some tools there. And there's some kids in our freshman class and some kids in our middle school coming up too.
Yeah.
I'm really, really excited about. But, I really want to see these guys take it to the next level. And I think we're still in that developmental stage.
Kind of going through the notes from a year ago, I don't think people realized, even though you had Nate Wyra and all these terrific guys on the defensive side, when you look at the fact that you lost Campbell Lane that week against Anthony Wayne, and then you had to try and figure out what you were going to do at that backer position, having him back is almost like kind of having somebody with a ton of experience. I know he played some last year, but to have him back and anchor that group after you lose some of the talented guys that you had there really probably helps you guys a ton.
Yeah, it was major. We look at, like, I think it's, every program, and I'm always curious and probably have a lot of conversations with coaches on, how they structure their program to be able to say, like, next year, like in my brain, I start with, do we have key personnel or key experience at each spot coming back, right?
Sure.
You want to be able to, especially at a Division I school and Division I program, you're hoping that you have enough depth where each year you're saying, okay, like this year, I was like, all right, well, we got Ashton Yeager coming back on the defensive line. We got Keegan Klotz coming back on the defensive line. Ian Smith coming back on the defensive line. Linebacker, maybe some inexperience, but we have Campbell Lane coming back, Jacob Vance coming back, and in the defensive backfield, we knew we were going to be super young there, but we got Israel Moore coming back.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to be able to have those 2 or 3 veterans per group and ultimately play with seniors. And I think we're still building to that point, but you want to look every single year. So having a guy like Campbell come back just gives you a blanket of security at that spot, because I think what's underestimated that maybe I know, but maybe have learned so much more this year is that you just can't duplicate the talent that we see every week here in the NLL and Northwest Ohio football. And then on top of that as well too, it's just you got to win with seniors, and you value experience so much, because you almost feel like in most cases, and I think for us, just because we're demographically a little different, just being honest.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe some perceptions out there about, I feel like we get people's best shot every single week. I feel like we're always playing in big games. We're always, getting the best out of people. Don't close it. We're always getting the best out of people. This is one of those nights.
Yeah, you're good.
We're always getting the best out of people. So it's like we're playing in games. So that game experience is extremely valuable. And, you want to be able to have guys each year that have at least had some sort of taste in that games, because, it's just different. I mean, I'm sure coaches will tell you the same thing. It's just the schedule that we have and the teams that we play. It's just different.
You mentioned that junior high team, and I know that, again, you guys were really dominant at that level, and it feels like maybe 5-10 years ago, just that constant churn of talent that you guys kind of have coming up through the program. I'm not saying that it wasn't the case that you guys didn't have any talent, but it just kind of seems like you guys are getting to that point where it's not about rebuilding after a particular year. It's about just kind of plugging and making the next guy work because you're so talented. How difficult is it to stay connected to that level, but then also just the amount of talent that you see coming through there? You obviously want to keep those guys in your district, which isn't always the easiest thing to do either.
Well, I think the goal more so, I think I'll say this. I think we're actually pretty fortunate, probably location-wise, of where we are.
Sure.
And I think we have kept them in our district. The problem is, I think it's really trying to, one, make sure that I have, and I think we're getting close, but I think it's having everything intact here at the high school level, so that way I can be more available down at the middle school level, because, we were lucky so far. Like this year we won both. We were able to win, I wouldn't say the NLL the middle school.
No, that's what it was. Right? That's what it was. Yeah.
Both grades were able to win that. But what I don't want people to lose sight of, and what I've been working with, I'm legitimately coaching a youth team, a 5th and 6th grade team this year as well.
Okay.
Like, I don't want to lose sight of winning taking precedent over development.
Sure.
And I think that's the battle that I feel like we're always going to fight. If we've been blessed, like I want to say a couple of years ago, I want to at least the last couple of years, our 7th grade team has had 50 to 60 kids on it. Well, I want that 50, let's just say 60, because I'm always going to go for the biggest number.
Yeah.
I want that 60 to be 50, and I want it to be 60 in 8th grade, but understanding it might not be for everybody. That's fine. but I want that 60 to be 50 in the 8th grade, and that 50 should be 45 or 50 in freshman year, and then I think that we should always have, and that's like the future for me. I want to have 30 seniors per year. Like we have 27 this year. We'll have a little dip, hopefully more next year with some, recruiting our hallways.
Yeah.
But, I want to get to the point where we have that level of depth that we can, truly continue to develop. So I don't want to lose, I know everybody thinks that, and that's what can get stuck in our community's brain is, well, you guys just won 2 championships in the middle school. You guys should be good next year.
Yeah.
You should be good the following year. Well, we're good, but we got to make sure that the 40, the 50, the 60 kids that came out are getting to the high school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I could care less. I get winning, but I really could care less about winning championships. I care more about keeping those kids in our program, and I don't want to sacrifice a senior who's going to be, because not everybody grows differently too.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, we're still a work in progress, but I think we're headed in the right direction. And, I'm, want to continue to build it with our staff, our community, everybody that, this is a great game. And I think we do have that luxury of demographically being a little different in the fact that, there's other schools to go to, but we are the big Division I school amongst our area.
But you hit on something a little bit that I talk with a lot of people about. And you mentioned everybody develops at a different rate. And the worst thing you can do, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is at 7th and 8th grade, yes, it's nice to win. Yes, it's nice to win a freshman championship or a JV championship, but you don't know that the kid who is 2nd string middle linebacker or your 3rd string quarterback or whatever the case may be, he might sprout 4 or 5 inches between his sophomore and senior year. And then all of a sudden, wow, that guy that was our 3rd stringer a couple of years ago looks really good as our starting quarterback. You don't want to lose those kids because of trying to go for championships all the time.
Well, 100%. I mean, I'm not trying to put us on the spot. I mean, I just know that, as we're growing on things.
Yeah.
I've had some, take Jacob Ragland, for example. Maybe Jacob Ragland didn't really shine much in middle school. And then all of a sudden, maybe a couple guys who maybe were possibly ahead of him, maybe just developmentally.
Yeah.
Those guys aren't playing anymore. And here Jacob Ragland is, like, we're lucky he kept wanting to play, but like, you want guys like that to be able to just stick with it, right? And then understand that there's a path one day to being able to have the opportunity to be able to play on a varsity field in some capacity. So, everybody just grows differently. Like, we've all had that hometown hero that was 6 foot, 190 running the ball in 5th and 6th grade, right? And then next thing you know, everybody passes them up. And that could be to a lot of things. That could be to getting involved in other sports. That could be maybe that person just found a love or passion for something else. Those things happen, but you can't risk it all and have the cost of winning take away from the cost of development. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot more kids that bloom later than early.
One of the things I've always admired about talking with you is you have maybe one of the best upbeat attitudes, I think, a lot of the time. And this is a business that can beat you down. And I think we both would agree there are days where I don't have this problem, but you probably want to pull your hair out some days and going, man, what am I doing out here? How do you remain upbeat, especially knowing that in particular this season has not gone according to script? How do you keep that positive attitude?
I think a lot of it comes from my experiences, and I think a couple of very impactful experiences. I think I've been blessed. I go back to Danny Hill, who was a legendary Hall of Famer coach that I had at Bloomsburg. Let's say I start with him, right? I start with him from the standpoint of he was so excited to get back to work the next week. Yeah. He was so excited to go back to work and practice. And it was always the same. Like, we would win, and maybe he was a little tougher on us when we won. But then we would lose. It felt like, all right, like, we can get this right. We can get this figured out. Like, there's beauty in figuring it out. Yeah. And I always admired how once I went right into being a student coach and I got to work with him, I was so fortunate to see, like, you never felt like the game is bigger than life. Yeah. Meaning like he always kept things in perspective. He was I was a student coach, then I went to be a GA for him as well. And it was always about like, hey man, get out and go do something,
Yeah.
man. Like, why are you sitting in this office, man? The work will be there tomorrow. So a lot of it was shaped, I would say, by him, and then I would say just the passing of my father.
Okay.
What's going to be more difficult than the experience and the time that I had from 23 to about 25, 26, figuring out life without your role model.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, so I always looked at things as like, there's this game. I mean, don't get me wrong. I saw something a while ago that said like football will bring you, like, this game will humble you.
Yeah.
It'll bring humility. It'll bring you to your knees. But at the end of the day, I think about, for me, for life, there is nothing that's going to be harder that I'm ever going to face up to now, at this moment,
sure,
than the loss of my father. And every day is a blessing. Every day that I have, I'm lucky to even have my dad for 23 years of my life. Some people don't have that. I'm in education where kids don't even have male role models, or they don't even have parents. I have a beautiful family, wife and 2 kids, and I just try to keep the main thing. And, I don't want to lose. I'm not defined by football.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing too, is purpose and knowing who you are. I've said this a million times. You can call me what you want as far as a coach, but I'm a dang good dad. I'm a dang good husband. I love being an educator. So if I'm going to be defined by football, then I'll leave that to you. But I'm very, very confident in who I am and my purpose on this earth. So those are some of the things that really just shaped kind of how I go about life, how I go about my day, how I go about my business. And, I think sometimes people can kind of misconstrue. I'm a super competitor. I played fullback in an I formation offense.
Yeah.
I got stories for you, war stories, and I'm super competitive, but I also try to keep in perspective of life and what life actually is. And at the end of the day, my job is to use football as an avenue to create moments and experiences for kids that they'll never ever get again, or that they'll never forget. So those are some of the things that I feel strongly about. And, I'm not going to change. It's not going to change at all. So that's where I'm at.
You mentioned experiences and opportunities. We got one this Friday, and
Yes, sir.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk with
No
you
doubt.
about that. Whitmer obviously got that big win against Perrysburg a couple weeks ago. What have you seen from the Panthers on film? What impresses you? And then kind of maybe some of the things that you need to do to be successful on Friday.
Yeah, I'm super impressed about how they, I think they're great guys. All of them. I think Ken's an awesome person. I think the guys on staff have been awesome. I think Coach Stacy, basketball coach, is
sure.
the man. And I feel like, they did a great job of, after suffering a tough loss of what I talked about earlier. Like, it seems like they went back to the drawing board, and, coaches got it right for the kids. And you saw them play a pretty dang clean game.
Yeah.
Against a very, very good Perrysburg team that we had to see, and obviously went the other way for us. So, I think when you look at them, let's start with the most important thing that stands out: physicality.
Yeah.
Right. And then you go to they have some explosive athletes, right? Some game breakers. And then ultimately, you got to talk about a quarterback that has played and been a starter for 3 years. There's something to say to that. There's experience. There's moxie. There's a presence about them. So I see a pretty dangerous team that, should be feeling pretty good about where they are right now. And, they went out and executed at a high level last week as well, too. So they're tricky. They're tricky. They're physical. Offensively, they do what they do. I think they feel like they probably put it all together, right? Like, they got a very strong run game, but they still are getting their athletes out in space and being pretty explosive. And I think defensively, they're unconventional. And I think that starts with Napoleon Jemison. I mean, like, he's, what do you, if you're a very structured a football coach, you're gonna look on film and say, like, well, what are they? Like, what is he doing? You know? But I think that's what makes them so unique and makes him so unique, and allows him to be able to make plays with some just really good looking guys up front and some really good looking kids on defense overall.
Well, I could talk to you all night, and I know that you're doing some family stuff, so I'll let you go. But
you're good. I got Kit Kat bars everywhere. My one door is shut. Markers are on the ground, so I think we've been pretty accomplished here in the last 30 minutes.
I will say, though, I know yesterday you had posted that it was the anniversary of your dad's passing, and I will say I'm sure somewhere he's very proud of what you're doing. So it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I do appreciate the time.
Anytime. Always good talking to you as well, too. Enjoy these interviews. You do a good job.
All right. Thanks, Stefan. I appreciate it. That was Stefan Adams, the head football coach of the Findlay Trojans, joining us here on NLL Weekly. And we thank him, of course, for all of his contributions. Just a great guy, fun to talk to. As I said, just really one of those guys that you can't find somebody better than Stefan Adams. So just absolutely love chatting with him, talking with him, and just a positive guy. As I said, when you see all of the stuff that you have to go through as a head football coach, just unbelievable, all the things that you have to deal with. So before we get to my next guest, I want to say thank you to our friends over at Victory Auto Mall. Victory is your trusted used car dealer in Toledo. Whether you're shopping for your first car or your 10th truck, their service or their staff provides outstanding service in a no-pressure environment. Their only goal to find you a great vehicle that matches your lifestyle and services you well for years to come. Victory, an established exemplary reputation in their community, and they are a buy here, pay here dealership. They are definitely the place to go. They pride themselves on listening to the needs of their customers. So make sure you give them a look. Ask for Steve when you go in. Call 419-345-3603. Visit them 1632 West Lasky Road, or you can visit them online at WeFinanceCarsToday.com. And at this time, we'll go ahead and bring in my good buddy, Justin Keller, who is the analyst with me every Friday night. And I love talking playoffs with you because you are a junkie like me, Jut, where we started looking at this stuff week one and kind of gaming out the scenarios and all these different things. And this is really, these last 2 weeks are always the most fun to me because now we're really starting to come down to the meat of the situation where we're going to finally get some answers as to who's going to make it and where we're going to end up seating wise.
Yeah, you could have made it a lot easier. We could get it done this next week, and there wasn't as much homework to do to try to figure all this stuff out. But no, this is exciting. It's an exciting part of the year. And I just remember being as a coach every Saturday, looking at Joey Tell and trying to figure out, how things are shaping up. And but it's an exciting time of year. And I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, you mentioned kind of staring at that every Saturday. How much of this time of year, especially when you've got some games like Whitmer played last week against Northview, or you had Anthony Wayne at Springfield, it's probably human nature to have your mind start to wander a little bit and start trying to think about, all right, who might we see? What might we have a coming here or going there? Where might we end up seating wise? Is that very difficult to just block out that noise right now, knowing that you still have a couple weeks left?
Well, for me personally, it was never really an issue. The only thing I would never, ever do is on game day, start peeking at film or doing that, because then my mind would start wandering elsewhere and I didn't feel as I was focused. But, you tell the kids not to look ahead, and but they're 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, right? So it was really easy for me as a coach to always kind of look ahead, just to kind of peek to see what was on the horizon, whether it was an upcoming scheduled opponent or whether it was, a potential playoff opponent as well.
We talked so much about the old Three Rivers Athletic Conference over the years. Whitmer coached or played in there. You coached in that league. It usually had several teams that would make it into the playoffs. I don't think it's a fair comparison because we're taking twice as many teams now, but it does speak to the competitiveness of both the Cardinal and Buckeye division that, by my count, when we look through all of the teams that are in the conversation, all but 2 of the 11 teams are still at the very least alive and have a chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, what makes it exciting is, like you said, all but really 2 teams have something to still play for. And for some of those teams, they're maybe at the bottom of their division, it still gives them something exciting towards the end of the year, right? And you're not going to, and I've been a part of staffs and unfortunately part of teams as a player where things aren't going well. You're out of the playoff picture. And you know what? We're going to start sprinkling some younger kids. We're going to start splitting up some reps. And maybe you're not getting every team's best effort. Well, now you are. Yeah. Because like you said, so many teams are able to compete for a playoff spot.
So let's go ahead and dive in, and we'll start from the bottom up. So we'll start with Napoleon in Region 14 and Division 4. They right now are likely in at 6-4, 5-5. They're likely out. The problem for them is Bowling Green and Southview still left on the schedule. I think we'd both agree Southview, of the two of those, you feel probably more confident in Napoleon winning that ball game. Bowling Green is not going to be an easy game for Napoleon. They're dealing with some injuries. If they finish 6-4, they're projected number 8 in the region. They likely won't, or will just have a home game possibly, but pretty crazy how fine the margin for error is for Tyler Swery and his group, that one more loss, and that's probably it for the season.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we started with Region 14 because, as I was going through some of that, this is by far the hardest one to figure out. And it's because, in my opinion, Napoleon is one of those teams, like we were surprised at the Fremont game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They played exceptionally well, I thought, against Anthony Wayne, made that a very competitive, at least first half, had Anthony Wayne on their heels. And then I know we were both surprised when we saw that Fremont score. The Bowling Green Southview game, and I do put a lot of stock in Drew Pastor's website.
Yeah.
He has those projected outcomes, and it is remarkable how close he actually is, especially if it's more than probably 2 touchdowns. If I had more time on my hands, I would love to go through and see how accurate he is when it's a 2-touchdown game. Having said that, he's projected Napoleon to win by 12 against Bowling Green, and to win by 10 against Southview. So again, from my experience and looking at this website, those could go either way, but we know firsthand, and having seen some of these teams, we know Bowling Green could easily, Napoleon could win both those.
Yeah.
They could lose both, they could split. So, and then trying to figure out where they would fall in all those scenarios makes it difficult when you're looking at Region 14, where if you look at the other divisions, and what again, you still have Perrysburg, Anthony Wayne, and there's some other close games that will determine where teams fall and get seeded. But the upcoming games most of them are so lopsided.
Yeah.
It kind of makes it easy to see where teams are going to fall, unlike Region 14 here with Napoleon.
I look at them too, and it just goes to speak to, it's not necessarily just who you beat, but also when you beat a team, who they beat. And those secondary points become so critical at this juncture in the season. And when you have a team that you've played and beaten earlier in the year and they get a big win, it just keeps piling the points on top of one another. And that's one where Napoleon, that's the part you can't control. You just hope that if you beat a team, they're going to continue winning. I mean, in reality, you'd love to be 10-0 and everybody you played is 9-1, because that will give you the most amount of points you can possibly get. But obviously it doesn't work that way. It's not that simple, but it really does speak to how critical those secondary points end up becoming.
Yeah, they do. And you don't have to look in, when I was doing this and looking at stuff, I happened to look at like Rogers and some of the City League teams. I think, gosh, I'm not going to go back and look now, but I think Rogers, that they finish 6-4, 5-5 maybe. And I think they have like 5 or 6 computer points is all, because they have no secondary points from their wins. So no, you're right. It does become critical. And then the best you can really do, other than having some program where you can plug in all the potential outcomes, is just, when Joe, I tell you, look at the max win out, the minimum win out, and then max lose out, minimum lose out, and just try to make your best educated guess there.
So we'll go to Bowling Green, who we just talked about. 5-5 likely gets them into the playoffs. Now, they could lose the last 2 games. They could win the last 2 games. But 7-3 gets them a home game. And right now, they've got 5 wins. They, like I said, could lose those last 2 games. But to have that home game in the back pocket, that's the other piece. And this, having been a coach, that's the other part that you can use to hopefully entice these guys to keep locked in over these final 2 weeks. 5-5, they're probably the 15 seed in Region 10 in Division 3. If they get to 7-3, they will get that home game. Everybody wants to play at home that first week. Everything becomes easier. So if you're Sean Kiss and that staff, I would be pounding the heck out of the fact that we've got a chance to play a home game as long as we win our last 2.
Yeah, having the home game is just huge. It's huge for the community. It's huge for the kids. It's just a morale boost for your whole program. And I'll tell you what, like as far as their projection goes, obviously we touched on Napoleon. Bowling Green's projected to lose by 12, and then projected to lose by only 9 against Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing too, which you said, and I think more than likely they're 15, but Drew Pastor has them. Here's the other motivator. Here's the big motivator. If I'm on Bowling Green staff, there's a 43% chance that if they lose both, their prize is Central Catholic.
Right.
So, I mean, if that's not motivator enough,
and they had that last year, which did not go well.
Yeah. I know they did. First time, I don't know, was that first time in a while? I think they were in the playoffs or.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then that was their, congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Cherry Street in place. So, for them, and it's again realistic that they end up 7-3, and it's a great year for them. And again, it reflects so well on the NLL and in that Cardinal division specifically.
Northview, Southview, they're out. We don't necessarily need to discuss them too much further, but that does speak to, even though it's easier to get into the playoffs, it's still not in Northview's case, you got to win something. But in Springfield's case, even though you got 2 wins, you mentioned those 2 wins just don't get you a whole lot. And if LaCharles's team was able to beat somebody that had picked up a couple secondary points, maybe you're talking about them being on the fringe of getting in. But as I said, and you pointed out with Rogers, you just got to have some of those secondary points to boost it. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it in at this point.
Yeah, and obviously the only chance Springfield would have is to be a very talented Whitmer team.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be obviously would be a tall order, to say the least.
Southview in Region 6, Division 2. That's where Northview and Springfield are as well. Most of our teams fall into Region 6 in Division 2. Southview likely has to be 5-5, which means they have to win their last 2 games. Friday's pretty much an elimination game. Right now, they're projected out. They have to beat Clay. They have to beat Napoleon these last 2 weeks. Knowing how good Clay is, you've obviously seen Clay. We've seen Southview. And even though we haven't seen Napoleon, it's not like Napoleon has been infallible during the season. Where do you look at with Southview? How confident would you be that they're going to be able to sneak in?
Yeah, I'm not overly confident Southview's going to be able to make it. I think they have a chance against Napoleon, depending on which Napoleon team shows up. And, we've talked at length about Southview, and I think they have some really, really good pieces there. I think enough to beat Napoleon, but I think this Clay team is, I dare say a team of destiny in a way.
Yeah.
But, to have the season that they're having, a chance to host playoff game and just riding the shoulders of Heinschel and Hazuda and those guys. I just don't see Southview getting it done against them, which would obviously eliminate them from the playoffs.
Yeah, this Friday you have to win, and then you got to win next week, and that's a tall order. And it's not that Southview hasn't had flashes, but losing to Fremont Ross last week, that's one where that's going to come back and bite you. You kind of had to get a few more wins, and yeah, these last 2 weeks for Southview are just a bear. You mentioned Fremont Ross. I mentioned Fremont Ross as well. They play Waite this week. Then they're on the road at BG to finish the season. They win one. They're probably in, definitely in if they win the last 2. Probably not going to get a home game. They're projected 13 in Region 6, but still one of those things where you don't want to leave it to chance and not win. I think Waite's pretty much a given at this point. But you don't want to leave things to chance and just leave it as a probably, as I said, and kind of hope that everything aligns the correct way. Because certainly we've seen plenty of teams who go into Week 10. If they win, great. If they don't, no big deal. They're in anyway. And then the unthinkable happens and they end up finding themselves on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and the one thing interesting, just based on the teams around them, and again, secondary points could come into play here, but it looks like win or lose against Bowling Green, and again, I'm kind of chalking up a win against Waite. Win or lose against Bowling Green, there's like a 70% chance that they'll see Wadsworth, whether they win or lose, which just means that there's not a team that's going to be able to jump them into that 13th spot. So, like I said, more than likely they're facing Wadsworth, and Drew Pastor has them projected to win by 44. Fun fact, I'm pretty sure Drew Pastor doesn't go beyond 49 points when he's projecting any games. As I was looking some of the lopsided games that we're on the docket here. So yeah, I think 49 is the max. So if he's going 44, that's pretty much a sure thing.
He picks the way that the Blade picks. It's always funny on Fridays. Nobody's ever more than 7 points apart from teams when they pick them. It's always funny. Everything's always 21-14 or 27-21. It's never too much. Clay, we talked about, as you said, feels like a team of destiny. They can clinch the Cardinal division this Friday. They basically, it doesn't really make too much of a difference, wins or losses. Now, they will finish the season against Rogers this Friday, as we mentioned, against Southview. Seeding really doesn't change a whole lot. They will host a playoff game no matter what. Can't really host twice. The interesting thing for them would be who they're going to see in that first round. And I think the Northwest Ohio football fan in me would love to see somehow that St. Francis falls a little bit in those standings and they end up going to Oregon to take on Clay. That would be a fun matchup in the first round. Right now, they both would face Cleveland teams, but right now for Clay, playoffs, not to say that they don't matter, but wherever they end up, they're really not going to change. For them, it has to feel like it's all about the Cardinal division over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And to be honest, I don't see them moving much from 6.
Yeah.
At all. Even with teams around them, like you said, it's really a matter of who they play. And I think Avon Lake, they're projected to lose by 19 against Northridge, lose to Avon by 31. And as it stands now, that's where Drew Pastor has them is playing Avon Lake, finishing 11. And unless something, they're able to get an upset, Avon Lake's able to get an upset there. It looks like it's probably Avon Lake because I don't see Clay moving a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that's interesting, though, potentially Sandusky as well.
Okay.
So
who they faced earlier in the year as well.
Yes. Yep. So that would be a rematch. I believe in order for that to happen, Avon Lake would have to win one of those 2 games. And then Sandusky, they're projected 6-4. And again, kind of wide margins of Drew Pastor's projections, but he has them losing by, I'm sorry, this is Sandusky now, losing by 25 to Perkins and winning by 26 to Port Clinton. So if Avon Lake happens to upset one of those 2 teams, there is a potential rematch there, Clay-Sandusky rematch.
From your history and Whitmer, it seems like most years prior to the new structure of Division I, we would play a lot of Cleveland teams or Northeast Ohio teams in that first round of the playoffs. And really, as you went through, very rarely did you play a local team. I think the only time that memory serves would have been 11 when we played Anthony Wayne in the first round. How difficult is it to gauge if we'll use Avon Lake as an example. How difficult is it to gauge just how good a team like that is? Because you look at 3-7. I remember thinking this when Whitmer played Lorraine in the first round in 2017. The record can be deceiving because you don't realize maybe how good the league is that team plays in. Is it hard to get a size or a gauge on how good a team is prior to watching them on film?
It's not an exact science by no means,
right.
But I would, you look at common opponents or, if they played someone in this area or played in a common opponent of yours and try to compare scores. The other thing that I used to do that when we would go play a team out of town, I would try to find as much like news coverage.
Sure.
It's Storied Rivals down in Columbus. They do that really cool video. They set they have the field level cameras.
Yeah.
They set the music if you see them, but stuff like that. And I just so I can see, kind of up close what these guys look like, how big they are. Cause it is hard to determine. And like you said, it's hard to gauge where they're at. So that was one thing that I always try to do is try to find as much news coverage and sideline footage as I could see, just so I could get a better idea of what teams look like, especially some of their team's best players, which was really scary sometimes.
I bring up that Lorraine team because I remember that year, and Whitmer was 10-0 going into the playoffs that year. And I remember we all kind of met up, and not that I had anything to do other than bug you guys, but we would join up on Sundays. And I remember everybody going, man, these guys are really good. These guys are really good. And you look at the record, and I think they were 6-4. Is that right? Maybe 7-3.
Yeah, maybe 7-3,
but
but young, and they were
yeah.
rebuilding. I think at the time, I think they might have been like 2-8 or 3-7 the year before, and they were really young.
And you guys had said this is a really good football team, and people are going to be surprised. And I remember thinking, and we've talked about this before as well, just off the air, where you're never quite sure like who the coach that's the canary in the coal mine is, or okay, if he's giving the warning, I got to listen to him. And we've talked about a couple guys like Mike Williams, who's on the Whitmer staff, that we trust his assessment. But when everybody, it doesn't matter, when everybody's going, these guys are pretty good, you know, you're in for a battle. And not always the easiest to impress that upon the kids either, to say, throw the record out. This is a really good football team. And I use that as an example because that to me even was a night where I think I even learned the lesson of don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Lorraine, Antonio Wyatt was by far one of the scariest players we ever had to prepare for in the playoffs. I mean, we prepared against Zach Harrison, Sam Hubbard, Garyon Conley, Ben Gideon. I mean, list goes on and on. And he was by far the scariest player we ever had to prepare for, and rightfully so. Man, that kid was so good, and I tell people about him all the time. And I wanted to see that kid go on and play because he was a special player. And they had some track stars too, if you remember. And I can't remember their names, but they had the 100-meter runner-up he was a sophomore the year before. I mean, they just had unbelievable speed, and that came down the wire. I think we won that on a last-second field goal.
Yeah.
I think it was tied at the time, though, and then we ended up going on a field goal to win it as time expired. But that was a talented team. But you're right. And, Lorraine wasn't a team. Yeah, I think when Solis was there, maybe in the 2000, maybe late 2000, 2010-ish, they were pretty good. And then there was a big drop-off there. But not a perennial power, a team that you're used to seeing in the playoffs, like you said. So, it's tough to gauge sometimes.
Anthony Wayne, they are in the playoffs, need to finish undefeated, though, to get 2 home playoff games. They would finish as the 3 seed if they finish undefeated. They fall to the 5 seed if not in Region 6. They could match up with Start, whom they beat 48-12 in Week 5. The question, or I guess maybe the answer, isn't going to come for another week because Anthony Wayne will play Northview this weekend. And after that, we'll get the showdown that everybody's going to circle, which is Anthony Wayne and Perrysburg at Schaller Stadium. But this is the one where it's crazy to think about the difference between a home playoff game twice and one. I don't know that it's a huge deal if you're the 5 seed, but again, you don't want to have to go to Northeast Ohio if you can play 2 weeks at home.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Especially, you need to take advantage. And we talked on the air Friday night a little bit about the 16 teams, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But if it's going to offer you 2 home games, you better take advantage of it. So, I'm sure that is definitely on their radar, and they obviously have a lot to play. There's a lot at stake for them that Week 10. They win the league outright, and then, like you said, host 2 playoff games. When it comes down to it, even if they lose to Perrysburg, Wadsworth and Northridge, that's a game they're going to keep their eye on. If Wadsworth and Northridge both win out, which I think could be difficult for both of them, they're more than likely to finish 9-1. They still have a chance to get to that 4 seed, even with the loss. They have the potential, but I think it's probably unlikely, as you said, to probably finish the 5th seed.
Yeah, really critical that everything kind of comes down to Week 10. Obviously, both coaches wouldn't have it any other way, but to have that with so much riding on it when you've been 9-0 going into that game, that's just a tough way to have it change. But we'll see. Findlay, as we just talked with Stefan Adams, he's had an interesting season losing Ryan Montgomery. We've talked a lot about that back and forth on the air on Fridays and also here. They are in no matter what. The seeding really doesn't change regardless of what happens to them. They're projected to finish 4-6. They're probably in Northwest or Northeast Ohio come Week 11, no matter what. I find this team very intriguing, though, because as I talked with Stefan about just a few moments ago, they've got a lot of young talent that could certainly make a lot of teams turn their head, much like we were talking about with that Lorraine team that Whitmer faced in 2017. This is the kind of team where if Landon Eccleberry has a great game, if they stop you on defense, if they're able to slow things down, that's a Findlay team that I think when you look at the lower seeds, that's a potential upset team at that 10 spot, playing the 7 seed at their place. Really could give a lot of people fits in that first round.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head when we talk about them being a young team. So every single week, I think that the room for growth for Findlay is a lot higher than maybe a more seasoned team. Not that Whitmer can't continue to get better, but the ceiling is much higher for that Findlay team. No matter what happens this week against Whitmer, as long as they're able to continue to learn from their mistakes and grow, and Eccleberry is he's going to be he's a special player now. He's going to be really special down the road, but they're in a situation, like you said, they're young and they could end up sneaking up on a team. And if they're playing, and I think I just had it, but it looks like, man, sorry, I just had it up too.
No worries.
1 second here.
But that does speak to, there's a lot of talent at other spots too. I think people just assume that because Ryan's not on the team anymore, that Montgomery's not the quarterback, that there's not talent in other spots, and there really is.
Yeah. Oh, Strongsville. I mean,
okay.
Good. I mean, they had the best chance of playing Strongsville, but Strongsville's a team that you see in the playoff. They're up in the upper 8 just about every year for the most part, and they're a team that might look at that Findlay team and see the record and know Ryan Montgomery's out. Have a chance to play a home game and just an easy game for them to overlook. And like I said, the Findlay team has enough weapons where they could surprise some Northeast Ohio teams.
The next 2 teams in Region 1, also interesting. We didn't really cover the fact that Findlay, Whitmer, and Perrysburg are all in Region 1 now. Instead of it had always been 2, 6, and you just kind of add 4 all the way down. For whatever reason, they switched that around this year. So Perrysburg and Whitmer, you almost have to preview them together, because so much of what happens the rest of the year depends on where Whitmer's going to be seated and where Perrysburg's going to be seated. Now, the Jackets and Whitmer, they're both already in. But if Perrysburg were to beat Anthony Wayne in Week 10, they will likely jump all the way up to the 2 seed. They would be home twice at 9, but 9-1, they are twice no matter what. So that would be a huge win for them to have just the one loss to beat Anthony Wayne, to take a share of that Buckeye division and secure that opportunity. But if they don't, and assuming that everything else works among the projections, and we'll talk about the Whitmer one in a second, but is there much difference in your mind between 2 and 4 at this point? I would say yes, just for the fact that you'd rather remove all doubt. Even if you don't end up the 2 seed, if you beat Anthony Wayne, you don't end up that 2 seed, the odds that you're going to fall out of the top 4 are pretty low. So I would assume that you're going to play 2 home games no matter what. That's why, again, that is so crucial to get that win Week 10, like we talked about with Anthony Wayne.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, there could be a big difference between 2 and 4 potentially, or any one of those, and that is St. Ignatius.
It's true.
St. Ignatius right now is 1-7.
Yeah.
They are. They play St. Xavier, Cincinnati St. Xavier, which I don't see them winning that. But then they play, and I got to see if this school is taking applications. Football North Incorporated.
Now, I don't know why you think they're only a football factory with that name. You said that to me yesterday. You're such a
I know.
pessimist.
I know. I need to, especially the way this year's election is, these campaigns. I might just want to move to Canada anyway.
Yeah.
And see if Football North Incorporated is hiring, because they gotta need some staff up there. No, but that is it's not a bad team, and actually Drew Pastor has that projected as a loss for Ignatius. There's no point total on there, but that team has won some games, or at least been extremely competitive in some games thus far this year. I'm trying to pull it up here. So.
Well, you mentioned, I think it was 22-12 against Eds, and That was, I think, last week. So they only lost to St. Ed's by 10. That's a big win for them. Even, I mean, not a win, but like a moral victory there a little bit.
Yeah, it was 10 to Ed's. They lost to Hoban by 31, but oh no, I'm sorry. Hold on. One more click. There we go. Yeah, lost to St. Ed's by 10. Lost to Massillon Washington by 30 plus points, but that's a pretty good team. But beat Ironton, who's 7-1. So they won. This is not going to be an easy game for Ignatius, but I can't even say without smiling. Football North Incorporated is coming to Ignatius. So, but they do have to travel on the road. But if Ignatius wins, I mean, they could creep up to 14.
Mm-hmm.
Getting some secondary points, could get to 13, which, doesn't bode well, if you're, or even 15 based on computer points. So they could land anywhere in there. So, there is a little bit of difference, in my opinion, 2, 3, and 4. If you got Ignatius coming, no one wants that. There's 16 teams in the playoffs. Yeah. You're week 1 and you got to face Ignatius. I don't care if they have 2 wins or not. It's still a good football team. They beat Central Catholic, or they lost to Central Catholic by a point.
Right.
And we obviously all know how good Central is. So that's going to be a big one. It's kind of ironic. So in Whitmer's situation, if they obviously want to share the title,
sure,
for that to happen, Perrysburg has to win.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing so, could end up costing them hosting Ignatius round 1, so it's kind of ironic in a way.
Well, you kind of hit on what my question was going to be, but Whitmer right now, they're projected as the 3 at 8-2. Seeding, as we said, depends a lot on what Perrysburg does and then St. Ed's does in week 10. Looks like they will play Medina at this point, but no chance that we'll know that for certain for a couple more. So to have 2 home games, they have to be 8-2, 7-3. That's likely out the window. Still slightly possible, but probably not. And there could be a lot of chaos, as we just mentioned, if Perrysburg wins, if St. Ed's wins. And all of a sudden, like you said, there's some torn feelings there of, yes, you want to share the title if Perrysburg wins. But on the other hand, you could be walking yourself into a game against St. Ignatius in that first round. And a lot of people, as you said, are going to look at that record and kind of scoff and say, they're not very good. But we both know that is not an easy schedule. And we've already seen in these expanded playoffs where some of these teams that are traditional powers that have been in these types of games have come away with the upset. And as you said, Whitmer, the last thing they want, Perrysburg, the last thing they want is to even roll the dice and hope that Ignatius is what their record is. You don't even want to mess with that because of just the pedigree and all the different things that come with playing Ignatius. So really, I think to your point, Ken Winters and his staff, it's kind of bittersweet either way, I think.
Yeah. I was looking to Ignatius 1-7, as we mentioned. The combined number of losses of all the teams that beat Ignatius is 7.
Yeah.
And 3 of those losses, St. Ed's has 3 losses.
Mm-hmm.
And we know how good St. Ed's is. So you think about that when you talk about, people thinking, Ignatius is down this year. And sure, it's all relative to what Ignatius is year in, year out, but their schedule is hellacious. And no one's going to want to face them week 1 for sure.
Well, and the last time Whitmer played St. Ignatius was 2011, and they were obviously a better team at that point, but that did not go very well. And we would probably argue that 2011 might be the most talented team top to bottom that Whitmer's ever fielded in the history of the school. And it was a close game. Whitmer did not play well offensively that night. Defensively, they held Ignatius in check, but it's really difficult to beat that team. I don't care how good you are. There's that mystique when they get off the bus that you're already knocking your knees together, and they are not going to be an easy out regardless of where they end up.
No doubt about it. Speaking of St. Ed's, that's another kind of X factor in this whole thing.
Yep.
On how things going to end up for Perrysburg and Whitmer, mainly because Ed's has to go to Moeller, which they're projected to lose, I think, by 20 there, which is probably fairly accurate. Moeller is loaded this year. But then Hoban. Then they play Hoban, and Ed's is only projected to lose by 9. But I think that's a game St. Ed's can win. And as far as if you look at Drew Pastor, he's got that kind of chalked up as a loss. So when he's looking at projections, he's counting on Ed's losing that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a game Ed's could win. With a win there, they could stay ahead of Whitmer or move ahead of Whitmer.
Yeah.
Stay ahead of Whitmer now as it stands. So that could throw a monkey wrench into things and, maybe drop Whitmer an extra seed there if they're able to win one of those two.
The other game that always kind of delays the inevitable seedings and the official final standings is that Massillon-Washington McKinley game that's always played on Saturday. And right now, McKinley was second in the region. If they win that game, they likely could jump to one, and we could see a little more chaos. I don't think it would affect too much for Perrysburg and Whitmer as far as where they're seated at necessarily, but that could also be interesting if McKinley, who is projected to go 7-3, finishes 8-2, because Massillon's going to give them a lot of points, and it could shake up just kind of where everybody ends up being seated when it's all said and done as well.
Well, as it stands now, they're penciled in as a 2, but that is with a loss, assuming they lose to Washington. So I don't think it'll affect much beneath the 2 seed. Obviously, it would prevent Whitmer or Perrysburg is sneaking in there, that 2 spot with some secondary points. That would pretty much secure it for McKinley, at least that 2 seed. But as it stands now, like I said, they're kind of assuming they lose there, they're going to be the 2. Obviously, win, they're going to be a lock at the 2 there. And the secondary points for Whitmer Perrysburg won't matter at that point.
Yeah. Well, while I have you, I'm going to make you go through the games with me for week 9 as well, since Dan abandoned us for tonight. But I'll go through the games that we've got on the docket in the NLL. Waite, we talked about 0-8. They're on the road at Fremont Ross, who are 3-5. Ross comes from behind to beat Southview last week. Waite lost 79-0 to Lima Senior. I think their quarterback had 10 touchdown passes in that game, which is unbelievable. You would have to think if you're Ross, you obviously want to get stuff done early in that game. If somehow Clay slips up week 9, and I think we're going to say this a lot, Ross could be co-champs with a win in week 10. BG won't be a pushover next week, but that's something that Chad Long can put to of we need to get in, get out, take care of our business, and get going, because we've got a chance that should Clay slip up, we've got a door open to be a share of that championship. Yeah,
and it's kind of a nice, I guess, I hate to say that, use the term tune-up game for Fremont to kind of regroup, maybe rest your guys, work on a few things, maybe break some tendencies with your game planning and play calling there, so they can get ready for that, their playoff and then their week 10 matchup that they have against Bowling Green. And, as we said before, Fremont's one of those teams where, fortunately for Bowling Green, it's at Bowling Green. As we talk about Don Paul and all the weird things that happen there. But, no, Fremont definitely good opportunity for them to tune things up and, like I said, kind of get ready for that week 10 and then get ready for the playoffs.
Springfield on the road at Perrysburg. Blue Devils 2-6, Jackets 7-1. Really nice rebound for Perrysburg after that Whitmer loss, winning 37-14. Springfield lost 43-13 to Anthony Wayne. That was actually 43-0 after the first quarter. Everything riding on next week for the Jackets. If you're Dirk Connor, how do you handle this week, knowing that everybody's going to definitely be looking ahead?
To be honest, it's kind of the same thing I said about Fremont. Kind of go in, get in, get out, break some tendencies, make sure you get you guys healthy. If you need to rest some guys up, get no disrespect to Springfield, but Perrysburg should have no trouble at all. And obviously they have everything to play for week 10 with the league on the line and then seeding and getting to home games for the playoffs. So, if I'm Dirk Connor, like I said, I'm making sure my guys are healthy coming out of there. And if anyone's dinged up going in, that they're getting an extra week to recover. Well,
speaking of games that'll be tune-ups, this is the last real, I would say, snoozer in the league. Anthony Wayne 8-0 on the road at Northview, who are 0-8. Anthony Wayne, we just said, 43-13 over Springfield. Northview lost 63-0 to Whitmer. Imagine we'll see something similar to what we saw last Friday over at Memorial Stadium. Anthony Wayne has to be looking at this as just being 2 games away from a perfect season. this is one of those hurdles you have to clear no matter how short the hurdle may end up being.
Yeah, I should have just recorded myself and played it again. You could have at least broke them up a little bit. So
I saved the better for the last. That's how you do this.
I know you did that, but obviously getting into week 10, you're going to see a lot of that. But
yeah, well, we're going to have that 2 weeks. We're going to have that next weekend too.
Yeah.
You earned your money last Friday, and we're going to earn our Friday money again next Friday. I have a feeling.
Yeah, if I come back on, I don't know. We'll see. But I think Anthony Wayne's relatively healthy. They
yes.
came out. So I know they're healthy going in, which is good. Now the key for them is just get in, get out.
Bowling Green on the road at Napoleon. We've talked about this game a lot. Bobcats 5-3. Wildcats are 4-4. Napoleon loses to Clay last week, 35-14. BG wins 35-8 over Woodward. Little surprised that score wasn't more lopsided, but with the way Bowling Green likes to run the football, may not have seen a whole lot of opportunity for anybody to stop the clock in that game. Bobcats still could win a share of the crown, much like we said with Fremont Ross. If Clay slips up this week, both Fremont Ross and Bowling Green going to be big Southview fans this Friday. They must win their last 2 games, as we said, as well, to get a share of that Cardinal Division crown. Napoleon dealing with the injury bug. Can they have others step up? That's the big question mark for Tyler Sweary's group. How do you see that one playing out? Really similar styles of offense, too.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough of Bowling Green. I know they like to run the ball, but I think at the end of the day, I really like that Napoleon team. And again, I know I'm kind of just keep going back to the Anthony Wayne game, but I think, and I just love their program. We've talked before about it, just being a small town and just that grit that they have. And, I kind of like Napoleon in that one. But again, no disrespect to Bowling Green. I just haven't really seen them enough. And, but really like what I see out of that Napoleon team.
Well, and they're going to have to, Napoleon's going to have to contain Jay Shannon and Jackson Schaefer, kind of that 2-headed monster at running back. Really going to be tough. So that should be fun. And I would imagine that's going to be a game that, even though it won't have a running clock, will feel like it has a running clock with how little the game clock will actually stop with all the running yards or rushing yards that happen. Clay on the road at Southview. Clay 6-2, Cougars 3-5. Eagles earned a share of that Cardinal Division title last week. They have to win against Southview to get it outright. Southview lost to Fremont Ross 26-21. Things have not gone well for the Cougars. Playoffs are looking less likely for Southview unless they win their last 2 ball games. Clay just feels, and you said it already, that team of destiny a little bit. They've found ways to win. There were some close matchups. That BG game was probably closer than John Gallius would have liked. But every time, every turn, Clay has passed the tests that have been in front of them. And it would almost seem cruel and somewhat shocking, I think, if this last week, knowing that Rogers is on the horizon, that somehow Clay were to slip up in this ballgame. They just feel like they're the best team, in particular because of who's playing quarterback for them.
Yeah, and if you're Southview, your number one job is to keep Heinzel off the field.
Right.
We talked about MacArthur. I think he's a pretty good running back. And, if Southview commits to running the ball, which I don't think Clay is, if they have a weakness on defense, I think it's their run defense, especially between the tackles. And I think, in my opinion, that Southview's one of their strengths.
Yeah.
When they do it, I think he's a very effective downhill runner. They're pretty good between the tackles. And again, like I said, I think that's Clay's weakness. And if they commit to that and are able to chew up some clock and keep Heinzel off the field and keep it close at the end, anything can happen. And I think in order for Southview to have a chance to win, they got to find a way to keep Heinzel off the field.
And then the game that you and I will be calling on Friday, 6:30 pregame, the Car Stereo One Panther tailgate will kick things off. Then 7:00, the game will actually kick off live on Q105.5 from Donnell Stadium down in Findlay. Whitmer 6-2 on the road at Findlay, who are 3-5. We mentioned Whitmer winning 63-0. Findlay losing 37-14 last week. Whitmer has to win out to get a share of that Buckeye. This is the game a year ago that changed things for the Panthers because they dropped that game to Findlay. Instead of winning it outright, they basically shared the title. Not that it's the worst thing in the world, but they were counting on winning it outright. I don't think anybody was surprised that Whitmer lost the game to Findlay last year, but the margin of victory was pretty lopsided in favor of the Trojans. Is there a revenge factor going into this game for Whitmer? The other side of it sounds like Landon Eckelberry is going to play quarterback for Findlay based off of what Stefan had to say. That Panther secondary last year really struggled trying to slow Ryan Montgomery down. I know Landon Eckelberry is not Ryan Montgomery, but this is probably going to be the most that this Whitmer secondary has been tested since maybe playing against Mason Heinchel and Clay.
Well, that's one of the strengths of Whitmer's defense.
Sure.
Really, I mean, of their team is that secondary. And we talked at great lengths about it. It is a very athletic, skilled group back there. And I think that Findlay does a great job of have great balance. They do a great job with their screen game. They got some guys that can run the ball. If you're going to take guys out of the, take some backers out of the box, they have the ability to run the ball. What they're missing a little bit, obviously without Montgomery, his ability to stretch the field and throw the ball downfield. Sure. Which even, I'll be honest, even with Ryan Montgomery, and again, their receiving core, and I know Coach Adams talked about it, but it isn't the same group as last year.
Sure.
And I think it matches up. Whitmer matches up really well with their receivers. So it's going to be difficult for Findlay to stretch the field. Not that that's part of their game plan anyways. But I don't see Whitmer giving up many big plays. They do a great job in the back half of rallying to the football, keeping things in front of them. So I think Findlay's going to be as balanced as they possibly can be and take advantage of Whitmer's defense and not try to force the issue, right? If they want to, they can't go in there and say, we're going to throw the ball this many times, or we're going to throw this many screens, or have a 10-play script.
Sure.
This is going to be the script. I mean, they're going to have to wait to see what Whitmer is going to present to them defensively and try to take advantage of it, and grind out the clock a little bit. I think, like I said, I don't see Findlay getting a lot of big plays against this Whitmer secondary. So they're going to have to establish some drives, which is really tough to do in high school football sometimes.
Sure.
Establish those 10, 11, 12 play drives. That's hard at any level, but especially high school. You get a penalty or two, and next thing you know, you're behind the sticks and you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole. So this Findlay team has to stay extremely balanced in order, I think, to put enough points on the board against Whitmer to beat them.
And you've talked about that Whitmer secondary. I asked you last week whether on top to bottom, and there have definitely been, I would say, better players at particular positions, but kind of surprised, not because I disagree with you, but for somebody who has seen as much of Whitmer over the years as you have, that you said that you could put this secondary as a whole on the list of some of the better secondaries that Whitmer's ever had, maybe the best. Again, that's hyperbole, and obviously everybody has a different opinion on that, but you can point to certain years where there was a good player or two, but to have the amount of players they have and then the depth at the position. You and I waxed poetic about Chris Simmons last week and how well he played. There's a lot of talent behind the guys that start as well.
Yeah, look at Chucky Isom. He's their field corner most of the time, and that's usually where you put your second best corner. Mm-hmm. And he's had an unbelievable year, playing at corner. And I think he was a guy they counted on this year. I don't think they expected him to play as well as he has. I mean, and not only that, but they're physical. Like, these guys come up and hit. I think we've talked a few times. Chucky Isom was right up there in the team leader in tackles when they're only giving up, I think 7 points or 10 points. It's not like teams are throwing the ball downfield and Chucky Isom's making tackles. I mean, he's coming up and making tackles. And again, and like you said, the depth too. Yeah. The depth that they have, and they're able to spell guys if they need to. But just really impressed with that group and the job that, defensive staff has done.
Should be a fun one on Friday night again down at Donnell Stadium. Car Stereo 1 Panther Tailgate kicks off at 6:30. Kickoff at 7 o'clock from Donnell Stadium. Again, Q1055, Justin, myself, Dan Naraki down in Hancock County for you on Friday. As always, my friend, appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you on Friday. And always love talking ball with you no matter what.
Yeah, always a good time. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Justin. That was Justin Keller, the color analyst for Whitmer football on Q105. Always appreciate him spending some time with us here. Before we leave, want to say thank you to Zach Nowacek. He says, "Fly, Eagles, fly." Well, we will definitely see on Friday night, Zach, if the Clay Eagles do win a outright Cardinal Division title. That should be fun to see. And again, just a fun story to talk about this year with John Gallius and his bunch. So before we get out of here, do want to remind you, if you didn't catch the whole thing, you can, of course, watch us back on YouTube. NLL Weekly is the channel, so make sure you check us out there. We're also available on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict. So all of those are areas that you can get our podcast each and every week. So definitely check those out. Like and subscribe the YouTube to the YouTube channel. Also, leave reviews, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get them. That totally helps us. We appreciate it. So very excited about that. And I've had a couple people reach out and ask what's the plan for winter sports, and the plan is to keep going. We will probably take a couple weeks off after the playoffs are over, but at that point, then we will likely jump into basketball talk, and excited to chat with all the basketball coaches in the area. So just really excited about that. Also, soccer playoffs start next week. A lot of NLL teams in contention there. Golf just wrapped up, so I know that was an exciting time. Cross country's in the I guess the home stretch of their season as well. So lots of big things going on in and around the Northern Lakes League. So congrats to all the athletes who have had success, and good luck to those that are still going on each and every weekend. So again, thank you so much to them for making the NLL proud. We appreciate it. So again, thanks to Stefan Adams. Appreciate his time tonight. Thanks to Justin Keller. Always appreciate talking with him as well. So that'll do it for us on a week 9 edition of NLL Weekly. We will see you in week number 10. Bye-bye, everybody.